Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Once again, thank you on behalf of Sound Vision for joining us this afternoon for a lively conversation with our dear friend, Dawud Wharnsby Ali. He is, as you all know, a very well-known artisan and artist, vocal artist, singer, writer, musician that we, many of us, I wouldn't say grew up with, but definitely our youth has definitely, he has been part of our youth for a very long time, for many of us. And now our kids, of course, are alhamdulillah benefiting from his beautiful rhymes. But he is more than an artist. He does a lot of things out there. He's a very creative person. I've known him from so many different sort of connections, but I know him, of course, for the past good 15 to 20 years through our association with Sound Vision and Muslim Fest and many other wonderful creative programming that he has to offer. So Brother Dawud has this bio that I like to read for you that he wants me to share, or actually I asked him to share with us. And here how it goes. His career is to keep life's balance, educate himself at being as self-subsisting as possible, provide for himself and his family through honest manual and mental labor, avoid wastefulness, remain gracious to others, and thankful to a higher power. Inspired by all that, he writes poetry and songs to share with others. Today, our friend and brother Dawud is here to share with us some very critical tips on how to keep our families occupied during the COVID-19 crisis as the entire cities are shut down and there's a lot of anxiety. People are, going through a very difficult mental and physical time in many ways, locked up in their rooms, in their homes, and sometimes in offices where they don't have a choice to begin with. So the question really is, how do we keep mentally, how can we keep ourselves sane, but more importantly, keep our children occupied in more productive ways rather than just them simply sitting in front of screens. So here we have Dawud. Inshallah, I'll have you take it over. And towards the end, we're going to have a Q&A session or feedback session as well. At that point, you're more than welcome to raise your hand using the Q&A box that we have. And you're more than welcome to also share any comments under chat box as well. And I'll help with that, facilitating that with Brother Dawud. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taha bhai, and assalamu alaikum to you and to all of you who have joined in on this webinar. My very first webinar in my life, actually, I should say. Being the Luddite that I am, many of my friends often have this misconception that I hate technology and I am against technology and I don't own a cell phone. That's just the way that I roll through life. But contrary to people's misconceptions about that, I've always just felt that the technology we use has connected us, but not necessarily helped us communicate very well. And now it seems in our world and with what's happening with the COVID-19, being forced into our homes and the fears and anxieties keeping us from the places we normally frequent, technology is becoming that utensil that is not just helping us connect, but it's helping us communicate. And as you can see, I'm not above using it because I feel that a fork is also a really important utensil, but we shouldn't be carrying it around in our pocket and constantly looking at it every 5 minutes. When it comes time to eat, we dig in with the fork or with our fingers. And now more than ever, there's a time for us to communicate with each other. And we need to use this technology for what I believe it was really intended. And that is to really not just connect us, but to help us communicate. So if at any time this technology truncates or you can't hear me or my voice doesn't come through, please just post a little comment and we will try to rectify the problem as quickly as we can. It is my first time using it, so forgive me if I don't quite use it properly or if I speak too quickly. Don't be shy to just put some comments in and let me know. I wrote this article, which Sound Vision posted to their website a few days ago, 10 tips to help keep your family occupied during COVID-19 staycation. Staycation, for those of you who don't know, is when you go on vacation, but you don't go anywhere. And that's exactly where many of us find ourselves right now. And when I was asked by my dear friend Abdul Malik Mujahid in Chicago with Sound Vision based in the US, he specifically came to me, I think, because he knows that my family is kind of a strange family. We, for many years, as Taha read in the little biography that I sent him, and by the way, I'm glad he stuttered, because he said something about me being an elf in there. And I am kind of an elf. My neighbors kind of see me as the neighborhood hobbit, actually, always sitting on my front porch, waving at every car that goes by. And I intentionally use that as a bio, because the work that I've done over the last 30 years involving songs and poetry, and even the work that I've been honored to participate in with Sound Vision and with Muslim Fest, has all been very haphazard. When I was about 19, 20 years old, part of what led me on my path toward reading the Quran and trying to better understand my spiritual, well-being and try to help my spiritual well-being, part of what pushed me in that direction was a feeling and the experience I had growing up, that being in close contact with nature provided me with the most sense of peace and belonging. And it was being out in nature provided me with the least complexities of life. So many of the things that we do in our lives and have been doing, in some cases for centuries, have been things that are very contrary to what the Quran may present as our fitrah, and the way that we as human beings could be living our lives, in a better, more organic and more God-centered way. And I often use a verse from Surah Al-Rahman to demonstrate this, in the sense that when we look at daily prayers in the Quran, they're very undefined. The time frames are defined. When you wake up in the morning, wash your hands and faces and pray. In the middle of the day, and as the day declines, and then as the sun, has completed its setting, and then in the night hours. But in terms of what we do, what we say, all of those things come to us through hadith and through different interpretations of hadith, with the exception as well of Allah reminding us that whether we stand or whether we bow or whether we prostrate, those positions are in the Quran. There are elements, but when it comes to the ways that we pray, there's a lot of flexibility based on our circumstances. However, if you look at Surah Al-Rahman, when Allah talks about the creation of this universe and says, in this universe and in this world that we've created for you, measure weight, measure the balance with weight. It's not about how things look, it's about how they weigh. And whether or not, that you have blind justice with the eyes closed, that's when you can tell the balance. And Allah says then in Surah Al-Rahman, keep the balance. Don't lose the balance. We've created the balance for you, so don't lose the balance. And that's why I tell people, my path and my career, if you will, has been to try to keep that balance in my life. And as a result of that, it's affected a lot of the choices that I've made in my life in terms of how my family and I live, and the way we've chosen to raise our daughters, the way we communicate with each other. And I would say that in many ways that has brought me to where I am in my life right now, that this COVID-19 and the sort of forced seclusion or forced isolation that we are all experiencing has not been perhaps as difficult for my family and I as it definitely is for other people and other families. And so with that in mind, I'm not trying to say that the tips I'm providing today are coming from a place of arrogance and, well, I know all there is to know about being a hermit and sitting at home, and now that all of you are forced into hermitage, let me give you some advice on how to cope without going nuts. That's not what I'm here to tell you, because it is very difficult. In our lives as a family, we are struggling constantly with asking ourselves, am I making the right decisions? Am I making the right choices? Will this be best for our children? Will this be best for our future? Trying to define how we live with our neighbors and saying, is this the best thing that we could be doing when neighbors are questioning us about why we're homeschooling, or why we keep chickens in our backyard, or why we're filling in our swimming pool with a wheelbarrow? There's a lot of strange, eccentric things that our family does, and they have brought us to where we are now. And I believe that perhaps there's some things in there that I've tried to share in this brief article that are not just about trying to occupy our minds during this difficult time of isolation that we might find ourselves in. But I'd like to maybe dig a little bit more deeply into why I've suggested these things as means of perhaps occupying our families. Because there is an agenda. My hope is that as families and as communities, as human beings, that we will use this time of struggle and test that we're facing to not just be stressed and overwhelmed and anxious, but to take this as a retreat in Mount Hira for us to reflect more deeply on who we are, how we've been living our lives, what choices have we been making up until now, and how can we use this experience to help us grow and move forward. That said, I also want to mention something about this article. I wrote it a few days ago, and it was a specific task that I was asked. Write some suggestions. You're a homeschooling family. You're always in your house. You work from home. Your wife works from home. Your daughters are at home all the time. You know what it's like to be agoraphobic and to be constantly in your house and afraid to go out. So perhaps provide some tips for us. But when I provided those tips and I went back and reread them, I felt that they also seem very shallow on face value based on, when compared with what we're facing right now as a community. There are some families right now who are looking upon this experience of forced isolation as a bit of a holiday. You know, my wife was telling me she was at the grocery store recently, and the man in the line behind her was telling her how excited he was that he didn't have to go into work anymore. He could work from home, and the kids were home, and we're seeing neighbors all over our street out for walks, and the kids are playing at the park in small numbers, of course. And definitely it does sort of feel like an extended kind of vacation for those families who have the financial stability of knowing that they can continue working from home, for those families who do have the economic stability of a roof over their head and the steady income that continues to come in, for those families who aren't affected in their physical health or their emotional or mental health, for those families that have, you know, all of those links on their chain of privilege. This might just seem like a great opportunity to take some time and catch up, as I say in my list that I go through and we'll go through in a few moments. But to families where we're maybe dealing with single parents, where we're maybe dealing with families where there is spousal abuse or any kind of abuse in the family against the children, against the spouses of each other, for families that are dealing with jobs where they work on an hourly wage and are not going to be kept on payroll while their restaurant closes down or their grocery store closes down. If you're a dental hygienist, if you are working out in the public in any capacity, working in a public library, working in any public facility that's been closed, and you are not going to be getting a paycheck coming in, this is a dangerous and stressful time. And again, going back to abuse, if you are in an abusive situation in your family, as so many families are, this is a prison sentence where you have no escape to a job or a career or a school or even a public library where you can go and get some space. And I want to just say that any of you who may be here today as participants in this, who may be in any situation similar to those, my heart is with you. Please feel free to contact me in some way that we can chat. If you think it may help, I'll be happy to try and point you in directions that may be able to support you. But stay connected. We might not be able to intermingle as freely now with mosques being closed and churches being closed and community centers being closed, but we can still communicate in so many ways and be able to provide each other with the support that we need to get through this. Let me take a break for a moment as I just collect my thoughts, because that makes me a little emotional. My wife said to me that although we're being forced to socially distance ourselves, we should not and we must not socially isolate ourselves. We need each other more than ever now. And there are so many things that we can do as a community to get through this. I live in Kitchener-Waterloo here in Ontario, Canada, which is known as the Silicon Valley of the North. And I'm hoping, I haven't looked into it yet, but I'm hoping that among all the IT folks we've got living here and down the street from me in the Google offices, that there is a whole host of Muslim community members who have already jumped on trying to get the Friday khutbahs put across onto the internet in the way that we're communicating right now, so that people who are at home, especially the elders in our community, are able to stay connected to, or stay connected virtually at least, to their local mosques through seminars and updates and Friday khutbah. People have been asking me for years, why don't I make music videos? Why don't I do YouTube programs or programs for children? And I've done those in the past. But up until now, I have always been the type of person who's got way too much clouding his head to give talks or lectures. Even a webinar like this is very stressful for me. That's why I write songs for a living. I can whittle away the ideas to a really simple idea, put it out in a song, and hope that it's clear for people. But right now, that's even hard because there's so much going on in all of our heads about how we can move forward. I'll stop there with kind of the disclaimers and introductions, and I'll maybe just jump to what I wrote in this article about our lifestyles and where we've come to, and the difficulties that poses for a lot of our families. And as I say, our family homeschools, we're home a lot. We're that crazy family on the street that goes grocery shopping together and goes for walks together and is constantly at home together. And it's not always easy. We fight like any other family. We struggle with a lot of different issues in our family, and we're constantly working them through. And that's what community is all about. That's what family is all about. I think maybe we're just more used to it than a lot of other families, because in our society these days, it seems that society for a century or more has really compartmentalized the family unit. Children are going off to school earlier in the morning than they used to. And in many cases, families, right after maternity leave ends, the children are off into daycare because it's taking both parents to work to support that family. We're finding university students traveling with education now. When I was in high school, only a percentage of the students carried on to university. And now that's just it's a standard. We go off to university, we study. Elderly people in our community and people who are struggling with health issues, and also the infants in our community, they're often the most marginalized, on the fringes, and have to seek out day programs or other environments with elderly people, places of worship, to be able to connect. So when we see something like what's happened now in the last few weeks with this COVID-19 and the coronavirus, it's forcing all of us out of the silos we've been living in and back into this one dwelling, of the family home. And that can be a big shack on the outskirts of Illinois, with a 4-car garage, or that could be an inner city apartment of 1 bedroom and a family of 5. The struggles are different for all of us. And one way or another, coming back to the family can be difficult. I mean, our neighbors here in our neighborhood, they joke often. Well, we've had many times where a neighbor will retire, and 6 months later, we find out that they're working, and we'll say, oh, I thought you retired. Yeah, I was at home, but I was driving my wife nuts. I had to get a job again, because oftentimes we get to know each other as family members, but we forget how to get to know each other as people and as friends. We might love each other, but we might not like each other very much. And we know of circumstances in our own community here where this COVID-19 forced, distance has caused some families to have to, send their kids to stay with other families because the parents and kids just don't get along. These are the realities we face. So the list of things that I tried to draw as suggestions for what we can do when we're at home is a very shallow list on face value. Some tips and things that our family has tried to do in the past when we've been at home together during long periods of time and homeschooling and needed some breaks, needed some mental space. But what I also want to mention when I read some of these notes to you is that each of these represents something a little more, a little deeper than just what it may seem like on face value. To say, oh, we're all home, let's try to see if we can get along and implement some of these tips. As I mentioned earlier on, my hope is that some of these ideas may force us to think a little bit more deeply about how we live. The first one I've written down is organize. Now, I'm a neat freak. That's no news to anybody who knows me, especially my family. It goes to the degree of obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'm not shameful to talk about that because this is the reality of what I face in my life and have faced for many, many years, and that's hard on my family to have a father who is constantly needing things to be a certain way and a specific way. And the irony of it is that in our lives, we're constantly bombarded with stuff. And the more we have, the more we have to pile up, and the more we have to, store places. And this actually intensifies the struggles of somebody who's trying to find order and organization in their lives. And it also clouds the judgment and the ability of people who don't struggle with a complex for obsessiveness. But just people who are trying to get by can get so overwhelmed. So we've laughed about this for years. And there's even TV programs, reality shows about decluttering and simplifying. But I've found in my life, as someone who does get overwhelmed very easily by my environment, as you can see, my office is cluttered. I've been working on this for the last 12 years, 15 years. This is actually 50% of what it used to look like. So I'm getting there. But we all have to take some time to reorganize our lives. And when you think of organization, I've listed some ideas here about, as a family, going through your closets and organizing, decluttering, going through books you don't read anymore, old DVDs you don't use, old clothing you don't wear. Use this as a time where your family can really begin to clear out. Because before you can move on with hope and confidence, especially in a time like this that's so precarious, you need to have a sense of who you are, and you need to clean things up. What's the first thing that happens when you leave a table in a restaurant? Somebody comes and cleans it. When you leave a hotel room, the first thing that happens, somebody comes and cleans it. When you walk into a restaurant, or when you walk into a house, or you walk into a wood area, do you like to see it messy? No. So cleaning and organizing things is a really crucial part of trying to create a sense of control in your own mind and in your own heart. The toilet paper thing that's going on around the world, people going into Costco and buying bulk toilet paper, has had my family and I cracking up. We just couldn't understand this toilet paper thing. Being Muslim families, we all know about the love of the lota. So perhaps that's why the toilet paper thing seems a little weird to us. But I started asking my wife, maybe we're missing something here, that everybody's trying to go for toilet paper. So I Googled it. I thought, well, is all toilet paper made in China and everybody's afraid of the shipments from China? The first hit that I got was a Mayo Clinic website talking about people's need for control and the social taboo of bowel control. And that if you are in a feeling where you feel no control, subconsciously, you're trying to think about what's the worst thing that could happen that would embarrass me if I lost control. And people are translating that to this need for toilet paper. So when I talk about organization, I'm talking about Taha. This is the essence of preparing oneself for wudu, for preparing oneself for Jummah, preparing oneself. I'm hoping that's not Taha by telling me that I've frozen. Is that you, Taha, telling me I've frozen?
No, that's not me. It's okay. Right. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'm sorry about that. Taha Bhai asked me to keep my phone nearby in case I froze, then he could talk to me. So tahara, cleanliness as a means of trying to clean out our minds so we can start fresh. And sometimes to physically do that, to actually do that, can really be very therapeutic, going through the house and cleaning things out. And you can help yourself feel like you're doing something by taking all the stuff that you don't need anymore, use anymore, want anymore, that might still be good, and piling it up for a donation when the time is right, when your local donation center is open. Drop that stuff off. You'll feel a sense of contribution, and you'll feel a sense of purging and cleanliness that may help you look at your life and your house in a little bit more of a controlled manner and a way that you can focus. And you can go right down to the food in your fridge and your freezer, anything that you can try to start to cleanse out, get to know your house again. And in the process, you'll find that the relationship with your children and your spouses may also go through a semblance of cleaning, because naturally you're going to be finding things you haven't seen for a long time. They may bring up memories. You may find things that bring up bad memories or good memories, but either way, it will take you as a family on a bit of a journey of cleaning and of cleansing emotionally and physically in your home so that you can begin. Not only that, it's not going to hurt to be cleaning things up around the house. The second thing I've written is ketchup. Not the tomato paste you put on sandwiches, but catching up on things that have been left delinquent in the house for too long. You know, there's nothing worse than missing a prayer you know, by accident you sleep in, or you get hung up at work and you miss a prayer and you say, oh, I'm going to make up that prayer later. And then you don't get a chance to make up that prayer later. And it doesn't take more than a few hours or a couple days before suddenly you might be thinking, you know, I've missed so many. Now it's time for Usser and I'm busy. I'll make that one up. We begin to desensitize ourselves to the importance of our connection with God and with our Creator. And when you begin to get bankrupt in that connection to your Creator, it leaves you feeling guilt, frustration. It leaves you feeling a sense of hopelessness. And catching up is a very important part of the process of healing and of feeling strong enough to keep moving forward. And when I talk about catching up, it can be catch up on your sleep, because so many of us are sleep deprived. Our lives are focused on productivity, and we're almost shamed into feeling like we shouldn't sleep, that if you sleep your health required 8 hours or 9 hours a night, that you're committing some faux pas socially. Good people should sleep 4 hours a night. And we need sleep. If our bodies don't repair themselves, we will not be strong enough to get through the struggles that we need to get through, especially as the spearheads of our family unit. So catching up on our sleep, catching up on schoolwork, catching up on work that you've let go too much around the house, catching up on your prayers, catching up on your family, you know, phoning your family in various parts of the world, wherever they may be, and connecting with them, connecting with your friends that you haven't seen in a long time, just to find out if they're okay, connecting with neighbors. Catching up on these things will also help us feel a sense of control, in the sense that we know that our actions can make change in this time where we feel like we can't change anything, right? So catching up is not just a luxury, it's a physical, emotional, and spiritual need that many of us have neglected in our lives already up until this point. And perhaps that may be why many of us are feeling so stressed. Cook, eat. We have to keep our strength up in this time. And one of the things which can increase the family connectivity, be able to connect our children and our parents and our elders in the family, if we're living in a home environment, an extended family arrangement, is food. That's what brings people together, right? Think of the Prophet ﷺ's suggestion for a walima. So even if you just serve the people some dates or some yogurt or something, but bring the people and give them something. To sit down together and have our meals together can be a stress for our family if we're all suddenly back home and we're not at school and bagged lunches and out in the community with our $12 frappa latte chinos at Starbucks. Now we're home together. Let's try to sit together and eat together. There's a beauty in the traditions of many of the culinary customs of our Muslim world of eating from the same plate. Now, this is a time of coronavirus. I'm not saying we need to literally be sitting there and licking each other's fingers, but sitting together as a family, if we're all stuck in that house together anyway, we might as well use those times to create something beautiful, fill our homes with the smells of food, teach each other how to cook. You know, maybe it's a time when the children in the family can now, have a contest with the parents. Who's going to cook one meal, which day? If you can make extra and freeze it for later, once this whole COVID-19 thing starts to blow over, we'll have lots of food in the freezer. Ramadan's coming in a month, so that's preparations for that as well. But don't underestimate the importance of eating together and creating food together. Cherish those very sacred meal times of breakfast and lunch and dinner. Hobbies. It's such a throwaway word, hobby. It makes it sound like, a hobby horse. Children sit on a broomstick with a horse's head on it, and it's just a way that you convince kids that they're riding a horse when really they're just riding a broomstick. But a hobby is not frivolous. A hobby is, my friend David Lamott, a dear friend of mine, he talks about the difference between a professional and an amateur. And a hobby is kind of what a lot of people will say, well, I'm an amateur musician, or I'm an amateur painter, or I'm an amateur soccer player. But the word amateur actually means someone who does something out of the love of it. And a professional is someone who professes to be or to do something. So my friend David Lamott always reminds me, he says, when someone comes to you and says they're not very good because they're just an amateur, remind them that an amateur is someone who does what they do out of love. And a professional is somebody who does what they do because they profess it. And if a professional ever stops being an amateur, they should stop being a professional as well. We need to take our hobbies, for lack of a better word, seriously, because our hobbies represent the efforts of an amateur, of someone who is an amateur, who loves. So if you've wanted to paint, if you've wanted to write, maybe write about what you're experiencing, the therapy of that is very important. And encouraging that in our children is very important. So many of our kids, their hobbies are video games, when their hobbies could be sewing, their hobbies could be different athletics, athletics of different sorts. Their hobbies could be writing or drawing or, researching. There are so many hobbies that we dismiss as being just frivolous activities, but in fact, they are so crucial to our well-being and to our psychological well-being. So resurrect some of those hobbies: woodworking, painting, tinkering around the house. We're always talking about reducing and recycling. How often do you hear people talk about reusing? You have to be able to look at used objects around the house and think, I could throw this away, I could recycle this, or this could become something. This could become a bird feeder. I saw my first robin a couple days ago. There are cardinals all over my backyard. Build a bird feeder. Take some time with your kids. You're going to foster a sense of learning, growing, and creating that spirit of an amateur, one who loves. And if we are people of love, whether we're building a birdhouse out of a milk carton, or whether we're giving our neighbor a call to see if they need anything from the grocery store at this difficult time, we're people of love. And our hobbies may be one of the most crucial practice environments for fostering our love of other people. With that in mind, look at spring. This virus has hit us at a time when, thankfully, the weather is getting better. You know, when I'm driving my daughters around different places and it's sub-zero, 20 below, we always make dua for the people in our community that we know and that we see who are homeless. And we think, how do you get through every night? And now the weather is nicer, but people who are homeless are still being forced to live in very tight environments. So the weather is a blessing to some of us, because we can now go for walks outside with our time off of work, working remotely. But it's also a time when there are still people struggling. We can use spring to our advantage to be able to not feel as cloistered as perhaps we would be if this was the middle of February, because we can get outside more. But it also means that we can be outside trying to volunteer in different ways in our community. That's one of the other items I'll get to. But jumping on spring, using this time of beautiful weather to get a head start on connecting with God, connecting with Allah, by connecting with the earth. Now is a time that you can start planting, even if you're in an apartment, right? You can still get some pots, get some yogurt containers, pop out and see if you can get a bag of dirt for a few dollars at a hardware store, fill those things up and start planting some seeds. Grow some tomato plants on your balcony, start growing some herbs on your balcony. If you've got a yard, if you've got a detached home or a condo where you have a small yard space, you can grow so much in a 5-foot by 5-foot garden patch. You can fill that thing with life. And the time that you spend doing it will be productive time. And we know that even the Prophet ﷺ, has said in hadith, right? If the end of time comes and you're planting a seed, keep on planting, because what you plant will grow for others. It's a sign of hope. It's a sign of connecting with the earth. And there's so much you can do to get outside and connect with spring. Research is another way of just saying, keep on learning, right? It doesn't matter if you are stuck in a room. I had a dear friend of mine, some of you, I wrote a song many years ago called The Story of Yusuf, the beautiful story of Yusuf. People have often asked me, is that song, it appears to be about the Prophet Yusuf, but yet it's different. There's something in there that changes. It's not really about the Prophet Yusuf, is it? And I often tell the story. It was inspired by a friend of mine who, during the Afghan war of the early 1980s, was a nursing student in Afghanistan. And he was taken prisoner at the time, and he was in jail for about 7 years. And he was in a cage with a few other prisoners. The cage was in the middle of a warehouse where they were being encircled by guards constantly. and the stories he tells of the torture he went through, the things that he went through. But he said to me that he used to call that prison the University of Yusuf, because there was nothing else to do at all under the watchful eyes of prison guards between torturings, but just recite and go over his Quran and his reading. And he would write, he would find little pieces of paper that the guards had thrown, and he would keep little journals, and he'd hollow out these stale loaves of bread that they would give him, and he would hide these little papers inside the bread. He called it the University of Yusuf because there's always learning that can be done, even in those circumstances. So here we are in our homes, full of books I've never read and instruments I barely play, and things that we've got surrounded around ourselves to make us feel a sense of control. Now's the time to read those books. Now's the time to research something that's important to you, and your family can all get in on it. You can have a family research project, or each person in the family can begin to read and research something. Even if it's something the kids like to watch on Netflix that they want to research. I mean, it doesn't have to be something heavy and pretentious and theological. It can be anything. Something to just get us all reading and researching. A couple more, and then we'll open the floor up a little bit for some Q&R, some questions and reflections. Exercise. I don't do this enough, but this is an important part of all of our lives, especially, you know, something we don't pay enough attention to in our daily lives. And now maybe a time to start a new routine. They say that it takes 7 days. Psychologists say it takes 7 days to start a new routine. So if we've got to be stuck in our homes for 14 days, we've got more than enough time to start a new routine and see it actually flower and bloom. And exercising can be one of those things. Something as simple as going for a walk each day, or just doing some stretches. I know some people get really into yoga, which is a beautiful and can be a very spiritual, well, let's face it, it comes from a spiritual tradition, right? So if we look at our salah as a form of yoga, many of the postures are exactly the same as certain yoga postures. Take that time to really milk your salah as an exercise routine for you, an exercise of the mind and of the heart and of the body and the stretching. Start a new routine. You know, I'm not an exerciser. I'm one of those people that is often so busy in his backyard, digging and heaving and cutting and sawing and doing other stuff. I just don't have time to go for a half-hour walk around the block. But now I do have a little bit more time because there's not many other places that we can go. So exercise, get the blood flowing, get your blood flowing, get your body, get that temple of your body cleaned out as well, you know. Volunteer, I mentioned that earlier about volunteering. Just because we have to stay a bit distant from people doesn't mean we can't still give to people. I am sure many of you, especially if you're in an apartment building or in a neighborhood like mine, you've got neighbors who are elderly, the most vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. So without having to get in their face or jeopardize their health, give them a call, leave them a note in their mailbox with your phone number and say, call me, I'm your neighbor 2 houses down. I want to help you get groceries. If you need anything, give me a call. Let them know you're there for them. So many people have done that to my father. He's 84, he lives nearby me. My sisters and I do our best to take care of him, but he's got 4 or 5 neighbors who've all called him and said, Howie, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can we get anything for you? And thankfully he's fine, but boy, emotionally, he's even more fine because he knows that so many people care. I know in my article, if any of you have read it, I mentioned about Meals on Wheels, maybe volunteering with organizations like that, but even Meals on Wheels has had to step back some of their activities and to try to minimize the risks. So that might not be a suggestion that you can take literally, but there's so much else you can do. And if not, if you're worried about getting in too close proximity to other people, volunteer for go out to your local park, take your kids, and find a few different parks on the map near your house and take a garbage bag with you. Plan an hour a day to go out and pick up trash for 30 minutes and play for the next 30 minutes. And every day pick a different park. And by the end of this whole coronavirus thing, you're going to be a connoisseur of your local parks, and you'll have also built a deeper, more meaningful connection with those parks. You'll understand that they're not just supported by taxpayers' money, they're supported by love, amateurs who are trying to clean up this world one piece of trash at a time. That's something that you can do. I remember when I first moved back to Canada from Pakistan, we would see so much rubbish in Pakistan. My daughters and I, we were so used to seeing it on our walks, and we would try to clean up Pakistan one gum wrapper at a time. We came back here and my daughters started to see trash at the park behind our house. And one day I came out and there were my daughters. I think my oldest was 4, the youngest was maybe 1.5 years, with gloves on, and they had gone through the park with their little red wagon and had filled it full of garbage. And I was so pleased with them. In fact, look at this, check this out. Around that same time, I was putting my daughter Miriam to bed, and she was brushing her teeth, and I went in her room, and there was this piece of paper on her pillow. And I tried to read it phonetically. I don't know if you can see it. It might be backwards from where you're sitting, but it says, "Take my place by saving nature if I die. DIY." And I asked her what this was about, and she said, well, I was worried maybe if I died in my sleep that nobody would take care of the earth for me. So I wanted to let you know, if you found this note, that there is always work to be done, you know. So I hang it on my wall as a reminder. That's something that all of us can continue to do, regardless of how confined we may be to our homes. Two last ones, very simple ones. Well, not simple, maybe very expected ones, but ones that are straightforward. And that's prepare for Ramadan. All of these things I've talked about: cleaning, exercising, eating healthy, eating together as a family, taking care of your neighbors, showing that love to the people around you, contributing to the world around you, regardless of how distant we have to stay from each other. All of those things, those other 8 things, they lead to this: preparation for the future. We need to be hopeful about what's to come. This will pass. This will pass. And I say, inshallah, because I have total trust in God that this will pass for us. It's not going to be easy, but it will pass. So we need to prepare. And because we don't know when it will pass or how it will pass, and we don't know how many lives may be lost before it completely passes, and we don't know when we're going to get back to work or back to school, or how many businesses are still going to be alive and thriving when we get back out into the streets, that's a big ambiguous thing to ask someone to prepare. So what we can do is look in the near term, the close future, the foreseeable future. We have entered the season of Lent, which many of you may know is the Christian season of fasting. It's a 1-month period of fasting, which ends with the Eid of Easter. And it has a different theological sort of interpretation than Ramadan, but it's the same idea. You simplify your life, you scale back, you step back, you put your schedule on its head, and you change the way you live so that you can prepare for a new way of living. And we are also going to be leading up to Passover, our Jewish neighbors, who are going to be celebrating Passover in a few weeks. And of course, Ramadan starts in only 4 weeks or so. So we have time now to prepare. Prepare for a new way of looking at the world, that if things do get rough over the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, if grocery stores do start closing, well, we're going to be tightening our belts anyway, and we're going to be eating less and living differently, because Ramadan will be here to help us through this. And when the Sahaba experienced Ramadan, they were still able to carry on with their lives. And in fact, this Ramadan may be the Ramadan that makes the Muslim community even stronger, because while other people aren't used to fasting, we are. So we've got an edge, and that means we also have a responsibility to try to help those people who don't have that edge. So our Ramadan can be a very, very special time for us. Write a little note, throw it in the next door neighbor's box if you know they're a Christian family or you know they're a Jewish family. Let them know, I know that this is a spiritual and a very sacred time for you. We honor that tradition. We honor what you're doing. We celebrate new life with you. We're getting ready to start Ramadan too. Let's do this together. Prepare for Ramadan and prepare for a more hopeful way of seeing the world. And lastly, my daughter's suggestion. When I got to number 9, I didn't know what else to suggest. I said to my daughter, who's 9, what should I say? She said, well, people should pray more. Because in order to proceed, in order to prepare for something, we need hope. And that hope is going to come from our prayer. We can't pray in sound mind and in sound heart unless we're clean and we're organized and we have a sense of self-love and love of others. If we've not learned what we need to learn and researched properly, if we've not prepared ourselves in the best way we can, all of those things on the list are leading to us toward the last one, which is fall on our faces and pray, reconnect with our Creator, reconnect with ourselves, and begin the process of putting hope into action. And I'll finish with one last comment, which is that my friend David Lamont, I work with the Abraham Jam. Second time I'm mentioning him, but he says such inspirational things. He's a tremendous mentor to me, and he often uses the analogy of a tree, that a tree grows toward the sun. But if a tree touched the sun, it would burst into flames. Because the point isn't to touch the sun. The point is not to find that perfection and hold it in your hand. The point is that we keep trying to just grow toward the light. And that's the best we can do in a time like this, is not expect change to come fast and expect change to come the way we want it to be. But we need to have hope, and we need to keep growing toward that light so that we will be able to provide shade to others around us and be healthy and continue to reach for as long as we can. And God knows best. Jazakumullah khairan. I'd love to open it up for the last 10 minutes or 12 minutes for some Q&A, or Q&R, I like to call it, because I don't have all the answers, but I do have some reflections. So questions and reflections. I look forward to speaking to you, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Great, thank you, Brother Dawud. That was awesome, very inspirational, and I learned so much from it. Let alone, I'm sure, as parents, you know, we can hopefully use these very, very practical tips to keep our kids positively engaged in our homes and our families, inshallah, for the next few days. So, at this point, as Brother Dawud mentioned, you are more than welcome to ask a question. You can raise your hand. There's an option for you to actually raise your hand, you know, as an attendee, or you can actually send us your Q&A in writing or in a chat box, chat group. So we will wait our next few minutes to see if you have anything to share with us, and we'll take up the questions or your reflections as mentioned accordingly.
Someone has asked if I can see the participants. I can't see your smiling faces, sorry. I can only assume you're all working from home in your flannel pajamas and things.
Great, well, thanks for that comment. Yeah, is there anything else you guys want to ask about, or if you have any questions or reflections or even ideas that are working for you, please do share with us.
Yeah, please share. Please share.
Okay, so there is a comment, I guess, or question. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Dawud. Jazakallah for your amazing words of wisdom. I cannot elaborate enough how much of an honor it is to see you live. I wanted to respectfully ask you, which is the favorite song that you wrote? I'm sure you get this all the time.
Oh, thank you so much for the question. I don't really have a favorite song that I've written. I always, you know, I write songs to clear out my head the way I clear out my closet. And once they're out, they're kind of out. I guess there are certain ones that, I guess these days I enjoy singing one called Dear Mr. Crow. I wouldn't say it's my favorite one, but I like singing it because I feel that, yeah, I like kind of what it's about. And I'm very passionate about what it's about. And so these days that's kind of a fun one for me. Yeah.
Nice. That's a beautiful song, actually. Thank you. So anybody has a hand, please do raise your hand and you can then speak live. You don't have to be on, you won't be on video, but just audio. So please do raise your hand, or you can again send a comment or a question as you like. So we'll wait a few more minutes as questions come.
While we wait, I'll hang my daughters.
Yep, good idea.
Oh boy, there's where my cleaning has to start there. I got to get that thing dusted sometime. Yeah. If people are thinking of maybe a question to ask, there's something here I would love to read.
Yeah.
If there's a moment, no questions. My mother-in-law, who is she works in Colorado. She's a pathologist. They very stressful job, having to diagnose people with horrible strains of cancer. But she finds it. She's a very inspirational woman and is always providing my family with wonderful little texts and tweets of wonderful inspiration that helped keep her motivated in her work. And she sent this, which was attributed to a woman by the name of Catherine Kitty O'Meara. And I thought I'd read it because I really feel that it kind of ties in with some of the suggestions that I've been making on this list, that they're not just about staying home and taking it easy and decluttering, but there's a deeper sort of spiritual thread that runs through them. This lady who was evidently an author and has passed away, I believe. I was trying to find out about her online. I couldn't find anything. I'll keep searching, but this is attributed to her. And it says, "And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still. And they listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices, and they dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully. And they had been healed. And I thought that was very beautiful. She just sent us that this morning. And I felt like it worked hand in hand with the suggestions that I tried to share with your families as well.
Great, thank you, Brother Dawud. Thank you. Okay, so a few comments and questions trickling in. One is by Hina Salim. Me and my mom saw a crow and started to sing Dear Mr. Crow, which is a comment. There is another comment, I believe, by Shahab Khan, one of my colleagues here at Justice for All. One of the, Salam Taha and Dawud, one of the most important ideas that I have learned from listening to you is that music, the arts, creativity might be one of the most important ways to get our entire family through this situation. Thank you, which is interesting. This was a comment, and then I guess there is a question or maybe another comment under in the chat box. Jazakallah khairan. This is from Huma Pervez. Jazakallah khair for coming on live for us. I've learned so much to try to implement with lots of hope, inshallah. Thank you for sharing all those tips. I'm just requesting a recital of one of your poems or songs, please. We're watching as a family and are really enjoying it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, thank you to my friend who said that they sang Dear Mr. Crow together, you know, and that comment about music and singing together. That's what is passionate to me, is not singing and performing for other people, but singing and participating. We can be performers in life, or we can be spectators in life, or we can be participators in life. And I do believe that the act of reciting Quran, the act of singing, the act of sharing our stories is very therapeutic, and it does bring us together. When we hear each other's stories, we know better who we are. So thank you for your suggestions and requests. Yeah, if there's time, and I've never sang into my computer like this before, but I'm willing to give it a shot if you want to hear something. So.
That's up to you, Brother Dawud. It's every artist's comfort level is different, so I don't want to put you in the spot. That's your call. I do want to let our audience know that we are planning to organize some live sort of sessions of poetry and songs and even comedy, inshallah, in the near future. And we are actually talking to Brother Dawud about this as well very soon. So it may be a more appropriate time and opportunity at that point to actually do that, because I know I want to respect our dear artists' comfort level, because I know it's not something that he may be ready to do at this point. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Taha. You know, I've started making a real differentiation when I talk to people about what I do, and the word artist comes up. I always think of an artist as al-Khaliq, you know, Allah is the artist, and I am just an artisan. An artisan is someone who tries to artistically make things that'll be of use to people. And to me, my songs have never been about trying to provide entertainment, and they're definitely not what the Quran is to us in terms of guidance. So as an artisan, I can only just make things and hope people will use them. So if there is a minute or two, I'm happy to share.
Sure, go ahead.
Any other questions have come up though, Taha, in the meantime?
There is just a comment. Appreciate your insights. Preparing for Ramadan is wonderful and very practical way of changing an apparently forced stay home time into valuable productivity. Jazakallah khairan. This is from Brother Zayhan Rashid from Toronto area, who runs a peaceful family project in our community.
MashaAllah, may Allah bless you in your work. All right, well, I'll share a little song with you then.
And we'll end with that then, inshallah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, my friends. Jazakumullah khair. Stand inside a forest, listen to the sound of breezes through the branches and the insects all around. Bend toward the earth, place your head upon the ground, where saplings will be growing through leaves that have brown. We must stand for those who cannot speak, the people, plants, and animals, the fragile and the meek. Bow down in mercy, give a hand up to the weak. Stay connected to the earth to find the peace we seek. Stewards of the earth, keepers of the land, we all have work to do to honor God's command. The balance of the world is held within our hand. We are stewards of the earth, but do we understand? Thank you so much, my friends. Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you, Brother Dawud. What a beautiful way to end our webinar today. And I hope we are equipped, inshallah, with enough tools to make the best use of our time with our families. That was beautiful. Wanted to, inshallah, make dua for all of us, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Of course, our esteemed presenter, as well as all the attendees and all our communities and and everybody in Canada and across the US. We want to wish everybody a safe, productive, positive, time as we deal with a very difficult crisis that is hitting many families very hard. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of them, and make sure that we keep praying for everybody day and night as much as possible, especially those who are actually suffering through the actual virus itself. To end I just want to request, of course, everybody to please keep supporting Sound Vision. Go to soundvision.com with your donations. All of this is possible because alhamdulillah, many generous people keep contributing, keep donating. All of this requires work, effort, money. So thank you so much for your time. And the last thing, but not least, as you know, every day for the next few weeks, hopefully, we are planning to be here at the same time, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with different presenters. We will hope to see Brother Dawud back over the next few days. And tomorrow we have Brother Abdul Malik Mujahid talking about the wonders of wudu and wonders of personal hygiene from Islamic perspective, especially given this context of COVID-19 and the cleanliness that is being talked about. And on Friday, we have Imam Mujahid talk about making the best use and most of your Jummah and your Friday, especially when the Jummah prayers are not there anymore, unfortunately, and the masjid is shut down. On Saturday, we have Dr. Farah Islam at the same time talking about your mental health while in social isolation, and so on. So please check out soundvision.com/webinars for more information. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing all of you once again tomorrow and the next few days. Jazakumullah khairan. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.